Today's topic is vulnerabilities and attacks, and there are a number of attacks. Got a Cain and Abel lab for you to do. One of the attacks, a man-in-the-middle attack, and again, we're going to do the web quest, the layer 2 web quest to how do you do layer 2 security. They talk about layer 2 security and some things that can be helped with layer 2 security as we go through these things. Man-in-the-middle attacks is one of those things that can be helped with layer 2 security. TCP is a pretty old protocol, and it has some real weaknesses. One of the ones that we've talked about before, man-in-the-middle attacks depend upon ARP, everybody's favorite protocol to know nothing about. ARP's a really, really stupid protocol, because you can give it an answer to the question you never asked, and it says, okay, I accept that. Yes? I agree. Not restart. Anyhow, so vulnerabilities and attacks. The objectives explain the types of network vulnerabilities, the categories of attacks, and methods define different methods of network attacks. We're going to look at, again, a couple of them, a couple of things that we can do. Demonstrate the man-in-the-middle with the Cain Part 2, I think is what it is. Cain Enable's got a number of capabilities. We're not going to go through all of them. There are lots of capabilities for this thing. This week's one that we want to do is the man-in-the-middle attack, which we'll demonstrate at the end, or I'll demonstrate, so that some of the things in Cain Enable get a little odd. You say, well, this is not there. I don't have the ability to do that, because it becomes a context-sensitive situation. It depends on where what window in it you made active before it does certain things. So we'll look at that before you go through and do that. Pair up on that thing. I'm going to show you how to scan the whole network. If you scan the whole network and everybody's doing it, boy, they're really going to get confused, because you're going to have a whole bunch of default gateways out there. So you need to kind of pair up, or 2 or 3 together to do this. Or when we do the layer 2 security, in your layer 2 security groups do it. Does everybody have to do everything? No, but I want everybody to see what happens when you intercept this traffic, the risks that you go through. And don't be like me, what I was demonstrating one time, said, hey, if you go to a secure website, you're okay. Just don't accept the certificate that it offers you. And then I accepted the certificate that it offered me. So I captured my own secure password. So be careful of those things. Again, when these things pop up, when they haven't ever popped up before, there's a reason. Hoisted on my own petard, right? Vulnerabilities, broad categories, are based on network transport media and found in the network devices themselves. The transport media, the TCP weaknesses, and again, ARP is one of those weaknesses. James earlier talked about MAC filtering. MAC filtering is one of the things that we can do to minimize some of the threats. What if I came in and just plugged in a DHCP server in this room? Where do you think you would take the address, your IP address from? The one in the room, because it's going to be closer. What if I made my own machine the default gateway? Where's all the traffic going to go? To me. What are people doing at Starbuckses and things like that, other than the what's the sheep? Yeah, they're doing that. But a number of people are going in there and setting up man-in-the-middle software. A lot of you have the WAN cards that you can bring the input in one side and send it out the other side. Bring it in on the wireless in the Starbucks, McDonald's, whoever else has an open, unsecured wireless connection, and just make yourself the default gateway. Run all the traffic through you. Send it out. They'll never know the difference. And no security, unsecure connections is one of the keys to that. And that's what these things, that's the way they make it available, and it's open access. No keys. Hotels obviously have keys because they want you to be there. So the network-based vulnerabilities, monitoring network traffic. What does monitoring network traffic mean? What are we doing when we're monitoring network traffic? How? Monitoring. We're monitoring. How? Huh? Watch. What do I watch?
Program you have for one.
Watch me like packet sniffer. What good does a packet sniffer do me? I wander around a lot today.
You'll use another program to monitor.
Don't need what?
Remember that program with all the beams?
Oh, that, yeah, well, sure. But I forced that. You're talking about ether rape. Ether rape's kind of cool, right? Protocol analyzer, sniffer, is a way to monitor network traffic. Because I couldn't see any passwords in that ether rape, because I just could see about how much traffic was being allocated anywhere, how many different places I was connected. What if I'm interested in getting your email password? What if I'm interested in getting your banking password? What do I need then? Keylogger. That would work good. But what if you move to a different computer? You're thinking there. This is good. What if I just wanted to intercept all the TCP traffic because kind of change maybe the thought here a little bit from the physical access, which is kind of what a keylogger is, having something on the machine, to something that's just available. Packet sniffer. Okay, cool. Packet sniffer. What good does a packet sniffer do me on a switch? You have to have port mirroring, or I have to do something to make the switch become a hub. These are all things that you need to look at. Huh? You can blow up the ARP table. These are all things to look at when you're doing layer 2 security. How do we maintain these security? So if I can do port mirroring, or if I can make the switch look like a hub, I can see all the traffic. Or if I can come in and just make myself the default gateway, or if I can come in and put a hub on the uplink, what's called the uplink port, the one that goes from here to the NOC, well, I can see all of it there, couldn't I? What kind of securities do you need for these things? What are the vulnerabilities of the protocols that we use? What traffic is available when? Just some of this stuff, I know that we start out with Security 1, or Security 1. With Networking 1, we talk about the LSI model, and it's like, who cares? Is that true? Nobody wanted to learn the LSI model, did you? Don't lie to me. No. No. No, 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 except for Sam. No. But it becomes really, I think, relevant now when you start doing security. What things can you do at what layers of the OSI model? What can you do to make the network more secure? Where can you do filtering? Where can you do monitoring? What can you and can't you see? And the devices that we talk about. So monitoring traffic, port mirroring, use a switch with port mirroring. Port mirroring, what does port mirroring mean? That's a really cool term. What does it mean? It means that I connect to, what happens on that port shown on the other port. So what I could do is go in to the switch as long as I get physical access to it and somebody hadn't changed the password and all that other good stuff. Or I could just reboot it and go around that because you guys know how to do that. So we'll kind of bring physical security as well as these other securities into this thing. And I can go in and maybe just mirror the uplink port to the one that my computer's plugged into. What am I going to see then? All the traffic. That's not so very good, is it? For real? That's where HTTPS comes in. That's where all of the other things that we want to do come in so that we make the traffic less vulnerable. Have you found, and in the stuff that you've done and the stuff that you've been reading, have you found a killer app yet to make security work for you? Oh, come on, there are all those killer apps out there. Got to be something in it. I haven't. There is no single solution to make this stuff secure. You can make it fairly secure by turning everything off, but it's not very useful. Just unplug everything. Is it if I unplugged everything, is it really, really secure? No. It's kind of secure. somebody can take off with it. I told you that story probably 4 years ago. Everybody was trying to intercept traffic and doing all this hacking stuff. And I think it was in Sydney, Australia at the airport. Two guys walked in with a clipboard and uniforms and just stole the servers. You got as much time as you want to figure it out. So what do you do with any of these things? They all hopefully come together. So we use the switches, port mirroring, and then network tap, and they talk about network tap. The first one was the vampire tap that was used in the Ethernet cable, the old Ethernet cable, that you actually, and a vampire tap, anybody ever put in an ice maker? I mean, that's what it is, where you take the attachment and you screw it into the pipe and it punctures the pipe and then it seals up and you put your water pipe. That's what a vampire tap is. In the physical sense, vampire tap here is where we just tap into something, and the taps that they're talking about here is we would just tap into the network. And we're going to talk in a few minutes about the ceilings that we have in here, these false overheads. Where is most of the wiring running? Up here or under the deck plates. I mean, this is a false floor. So that's deck plates. You can crawl. It's really nasty, but you can get under there. Depends on which room you're in. All the ones, you're right, all the ones on the interior have false deck plates. So depending on which room we're in, we would know where we need to attack the wiring, don't we? Either under the deck plates or in the false ceiling. So what if we went up there and just put in a little Ethernet tap? Well, we went up there and just plugged in a hub. That'd be a lot easier, wouldn't it? Nobody'd ever know unless you're paying attention to what's going on with your traffic. It is really difficult to be able to detect somebody that has tapped into an Ethernet, and that's one of the strengths and weaknesses of Ethernet, isn't it? Is it not? How difficult is it to put a computer on an Ethernet? Just plug it in, as long as the switch is configured to allow that. What if the switch isn't configured to allow that? Now we've complicated the issue for whoever's trying to attack the network. To me, and I think I probably asked this the first day, to me networking, security is kind of like what usually happens to me when I do these 5-minute projects that take 3 hours. You do one thing, well, you got to do something before you do something else, and you got to do something before you do that, and you got to do something else before you do that. Is there any killer app to make a network secure? I don't think so. There are lots of little steps that you can do to complicate it for somebody that's trying to attack your network. Absolutely. And when you do that, what you want to do is make your network less attractive than the next guy, so that they go there instead of to you. So the network tap, and this is just showing port mirroring, the mirror port, the monitoring computer, and this is if we use the uplink port to mirror, we're now watching the traffic from all of these devices. And honestly, as long as you have these things together, you probably don't even have to be on the exact switch to mirror the port. You can mirror it from other ports as long as you've got it set up to allow that to happen. But we can monitor all the traffic. Where do you really want to monitor? What traffic do you want to see? You want to see the stuff right here between the switch and the router, which we would be watching here. Then you're watching all of your traffic. Is it going to be something that's really easy to figure out what the heck's going on? Probably not. You need to have some idea of what you're looking for. This is a protocol analyzer output. Each of the protocol analyzers, and there are multiples of them in the Windows courses, we use the network monitor, which is the one that Microsoft wanted to use. My favorite is still Wireshark. There are others out there. Linux comes loaded with them. So there's not just one. Wireshark, pretty well supported, lots of information about it, and it's open source. But we see all this traffic, and then we're going to need to filter the traffic. What are we looking for? Are you going to be able to read all this? Probably not. And these things, this is not the raw data. This is interpreted data. Each of the protocol analyzers interprets the data a little bit differently than all the other ones do. Picture of the network tap. We just put it again in the network flow path so that you see all the traffic going on its way out. And this one again between the firewall and the router, so we're watching traffic in the DMZ, traffic going in and out, whatever we want to do. Can be used for legitimate purposes. They can be used for the bad guys also. Any of these things can be used for good and bad. A password cracker can be used for legitimate purposes. Can it? How would you use a password cracker for a legitimate purpose? You forgot, you want to recover it. What if you want to find out if the users on your network are actually using good passwords? Could I just go, I as a network administrator, have administrative authority, go to my domain controller and see how long it takes to crack the passwords in Active Directory? Is that a legitimate use of a password cracker? Now, if I sent that out as a Trojan to your network and used it, would that be a legitimate use? That one. So many of these tools can be used for good and bad. Network protocol analyzers. We had an instance here that it was a multiple step, and you're going to find that most of these things are multiple steps, and it's like you kind of stumble on some of these issues. We use OpenDNS, which Sam loves because we can now block his game. But we kept getting these hits on this really odd domain name. I mean, a lot of hits, like 1,000 a day, something we never heard of. So we go look it up, and it apparently had gone away, but had been involved in some form in child pornography. It was a German site. It was apparently no longer active. But somebody had gotten infected. Now what's the next step? We have all these hits. What's the next step? Block it. Okay, block it. You're still going for all these lookups. We still have an infected computer. First I got to find it. How am I going to find it? Packet tracer. Packet tracer. Wireshark. Do a protocol analyzer. We watch the traffic. Then we filter the traffic looking for a domain lookup for that particular name. Once that happens, I can go to DNS and find out which machine's trying to find that IP address. Then I can go fix the issue with the computer. Oh golly, that was really cool, but it kept coming up with different machines. Oh man. What would you guess in an environment like this if it kept coming up with different machines? A worm? What if it's on somebody's home directory? Now we got to find out what user is using those computers. Is it always cut and dry? Sometimes it is, but many times it's not. It becomes an investigative chain as to what goes on. And the other things we talk about, wired network, go back to the lecture, to the slides. Wired network things, how are you going to get into these things? We've talked about a lot of these already. False ceilings. It's a fact of life. There are false ceilings out there. One of the places you really don't want a false ceiling is in your NOC. Or if you have a false ceiling, you want to be sure that there's a wall that goes all the way to the roof around your NOC. Mission impossible. Drop in through the ceiling, exactly. Exposed wiring. The exposed wiring here are the RJ45. We have a lot of exposed wiring in these rooms, don't we? And unprotected RJ45 jacks. Unprotected means if you're in a business and you have in the waiting area, for instance, let's go to the bank and pick them in the lobby area. Can't unplug ours, but what about in the lobby? Do you have unprotected? Do you have RJ45 jacks just there? Probably not. But what about in some waiting areas? Might they be there? What do you want to do? Take them out of the switch so that they're not live. When you want to use them, put them in the switch. Yes, it's a pain. It's just like everything that becomes secure is kind of a pain. You got a number of steps that you have to do in order to make these things effective, and you have to be consistent with what you do. These are some of the terms that I've alluded to earlier. The first one here says switch flooding. An attacker can overflow, as Sam said, the MAC table. And if we overflow the MAC table in the switch, guess what? It ain't a switch anymore. It's now a hub. And if it's a hub, huh?
I'm not looking through that whole list.
I'm not looking through that whole list. It gets, once the MAC table gets too full, it just doesn't, it can't. It's not just lazy, it can't. There's too many MAC addresses. So we do that, we make the switch a hub. When we make the switch a hub, it makes our protocol analyzer, our sniffer, a lot more effective. MAC address impersonation. Why would I want to do that? What if on my computer I went over here and told all you guys that my computer is the default gateway? What if James turned on his MAC filtering on his wireless access point? How am I going to get on his wireless access point? I'm going to spoof one of the MACs that he's allowed onto his network. Guess what? You can see in a protocol analyzer. So now I can get a list of viable MAC addresses, and that's going to be the first step in doing those things. So spoofing MAC addresses. Fake network redirect. Two computers on different logical network segments. Device A must send its request to talk to device B through a router. An attacker on device X could send a fake network redirect to device A claiming that it should send device B's packet to device X. This is just intercepting a TCP or hijacking a TCP connection so that you send the stuff here. A number of different ways to get those things. Router advertisements. Routers send advertisements, and in this one, an attacker could pretend to be a router, send a false advertisement, and send the traffic to us. Fake device redirect can pretend to be a valid network device by sending a fake device redirect to the switch. All of these things take advantage of the weaknesses of the TCP protocol. So what we want to do with these things. Another one, network vulnerabilities, weak passwords. Has anybody ever gone to the internet and done a search on default passwords? I don't remember what it was. I found one time. The passwords that come, the backdoor passwords that come in all of the devices, they're out there. You know, you go in and change the password of the device, the admin or administrator or whatever that device password is. You know, there's a bunch of others out there too. Like wireless routers. Oh, how about like a Cisco device? How about like a 3-com switch? Oh golly, we forgot the password of the admin password, the default admin password. Well, let's just go search. Let's go find another one. They're available. You need to change all those things unless you want people to be able to change your devices. Password, and they talk about secret combination, and we know what that is in order to authenticate, validate yourself, identify yourself on the network. But the password paradox, what's the password paradox? Well, we say, we want you to use a really, really good password. A really, really good password is hard to remember. But don't write it down. And this slide says don't write it down, and I'm assuming the test still says don't write it down. Most of the security experts say, go ahead and write it down just to make sure it's a good password. How many different network devices are you going to have on the network that you have passwords to? More than 3, right? How many passwords you going to have?
3. More than 3.
How you going to keep track of them? You're not supposed to write them down? To me, this really does become a true paradox because let's say you have 100 devices with 100 different passwords and you didn't write them down and for some reason you can remember them all and then you walk in front of a bus. Single point of failure. They really should be written down and stored in a safe with trusted third party. In our case would be the campus president, whoever at some point of responsibility that has a safe should have those passwords. So if something like that happens, you get sick. I mean, you have to walk in front of a bus. Let's say you get sick and something has to be done that day. You have to have an appendectomy and you're in surgery. You're probably not going to tell somebody what the password is at that point. They need to be stored safely somewhere. And these are things to think about to allow access to those resources if somebody, responsible party, needs to get access to those. Can be set to expire. We know that after a certain period of time. And you should change these things. How many of you use the same password for a number of different accounts on the internet?
I changed like 3 letters.
Changed like 3 letters. Hey, that's really good. Changed like 3 letters. I still got a starting point. How many of you use things that have at least part of it is a whole word? You got no words. All symbols and numbers. We're going to do that next week. We'll do the password cracking part of Cain and Abel. It's not a real complex lab. It just demonstrates what things can do. Symbols are good. Special characters really complicate the issue. Numbers help. Combination uppercase, lowercase. Well, a lot of the password crackers do now, they're called hybrid crackers, that they look for strings that are words or parts of words. And then once they figure that out, they go to a brute force attack for the rest of the password, which speeds things up. But passwords set to expire and should be set to expire. You should change them on a regular basis. And a lot of the things that you read about passwords is, core password that you may want to use so that you can remember these things. But you may want to have sets of passwords that you use, but multiple sets of passwords, so that if somebody compromises one, they haven't compromised the whole system. That's the problem with it. Characteristics, weak passwords, common word, like ECPI on your routers. Probably not the best password in the world on your routers at ECPI. Not changing passwords unless forced to do so. All of you change your passwords here on a regular basis, right? Whether you have to or not. You're forced to. I agree. I wouldn't either. Passwords are too short. When we get into the password cracking, what the password crackers do is break it up. That's why the 8 characters, so that it has to do both halves of the password cracking. Personal information in the password, dog's name, wife's name, kids' birthdays, whatever else. Makes it easy to remember. Also makes it more vulnerable because it gives somebody a starting point. Same password for all accounts. We've already talked about that one. Writing the password down. And I'm not sure that writing the password down really is something that should be in the verboten list, and this is my opinion, but I have read this in other places, because you really do want users to use good passwords. What if I write down the passwords and put them in my wallet? How vulnerable are they? Somebody go get my wallet. They're probably pretty good, but I probably would know that password is missing then, wouldn't I? And I could go back and change it.
They wouldn't know what it goes to either, probably.
Yeah, that may or may not be the case. What if we took a sticky note and put it right on our monitor? Huh? You're asking for it, I agree. Do people do that? Go to work and flip over the keyboards and see how many passwords you find. We had a long time ago, who's no longer here, a nursing instructor who had them all stuck right on the monitor. Email, username, password, all of that stuff. Hey, you know what I told him I was going to do? I'm going to take your username and password. I'm going to send an email to HR and say, hey, I forgot the password to get into my pay account. And I'm going to have them email me a password change, and then I'm going to go to your pay account, and I'm going to have your check deposited in my account. Would that work? Theoretically. Would it work for long? Probably not. But
Well, here's what you could have done. You could have just scanned it and changed from different computers.
change different, yeah.
And the user would come back to their terminal and they would try to scan
Yeah.
somebody.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you can do those things.
They'd be used to
People do that. Under the blotters on their desk, on the keyboards, some of them really just stick them right on the computer, so they won't forget them. That writing down the password, probably not a good thing. Write it down, lock it up, put it someplace secure. Probably better than having weak passwords too short, using your birthday or those whatever, your kids' names, pets' names, kids' birthdays. Those shouldn't be part of them. The default account, these are the ones that I referred to earlier. The default accounts, including our user account administrator in Windows, really is not designed to be used forever. The default accounts are designed to get the thing set up, and then they should be disabled. So the default accounts and the default passwords, there are a number of them out there that have different authorities on the different devices. A lot of that is searchable, so you really need to pay attention to the default accounts, what goes on with them. These are some examples. These are really good account names, right? IBM, for an IBM device. I like this first password. Hey, we do that, right? What's the first password? What's the password I use for everything on this? On the capital P password 1. Is that a real failing? Yeah. In some, in the example, yes. For what we're doing, probably not. But to get to that, you have to be able to authenticate separately using other usernames and passwords. So each of these things, and then we have different account names, and each of these would have, the IBM obviously would have all the same authority. The QServe would be a different function. So in these devices, there are default accounts with default passwords that you need to look at what's there, what needs to be changed. Backdoor, and I guess this was the book I was talking where I saw that. An account is secretly set up to provide without the administrator's knowledge or permission, so that it cannot be easily detected, so you can get back to the network. One of the last things that a hacker wants to do when they get on the system is to have access again, to be able to get back onto the device. They're going to put a back door on. When you did the Net Bus Lab, what port did you go through? 27734, does that sound right? Close? I don't remember if that's exactly. How would we detect a back door on those machines?
You looked through ports.
Well, we did a port scan and found that odd. Where'd that come from?
Yeah, I mean, especially if it's established.
But if it's established, it doesn't really have to be established. If it's just there. We'll get into port scanning later on, but Nmap, which is open source port scanner, actually has a scan that it does. It's called the SYN attack. What does that mean? I send you a SYN. Well, golly, the port's open. You send me a SYN-ACK. I turned off all my ping. How do they know I'm there? Well, golly, if I send a SYN, you send me a SYN-ACK, guess what? You're probably there, even if ping doesn't answer. And then it doesn't do an attack, and that would be a distributed denial of service, where we kept that open. It actually sends a reset, says, hey, I know you're live, and I know that port's open. So you get a listing of the ports that are available to you from it without actually having to have an active connection, because it tries that. Kind of fun, isn't it? And this goes back to the question we talked about earlier today. A lot of computers are made in China. What if they're putting back doors in the BIOS? Would we know? Maybe. What if we took advantage of the vulnerabilities in a keyboard BIOS and put a keystroke logger on the keyboard itself? That'd be a great place to have it, wouldn't it? You wouldn't even have to worry about coming in and looking because there would be no physical device to see. It would actually be in the BIOS itself. So how are we doing those things? Network device can be infected by an attacker or a programmer. Software creates a backdoor. Programmers create a lot of backdoors so that they can get in if they need to. James is chuckling. He's a programmer. You ever created a backdoor, did you? Yeah. Huh?
Anytime you want to do anything with sockets, the WinSocket, it automatically pops up the window.
Yeah.
You know, the window for the firewall and stuff.
Yeah. Privilege escalation in the hacking when somebody's trying to get onto the system. The first thing is to get a foot in the door. The second thing you want to do, they're going to want to do is after they get an account, even if it's a guest account, then we can try privilege escalation so that we raise our privilege level to the administrative level. Categories: denial of service, spoofing, man in the middle, and replay attacks. We'll just go through these. Denial of service we've kind of talked about, heard about recently with the WikiLeaks attacks. I haven't heard a lot about them over the holidays. Anybody? Are they still attacking? I mean, they were attacking the people that took them off, and they were attacking it and all those other things. Denial of service, a couple of different ways you can do it. Fill up the pipe. And in today's world, it's kind of hard to fill that pipe up, isn't it? In the not too distant past, you could do it with a good, multiple ping program. Just tie up the traffic. But now the bandwidth is high, so the attack's got to be someplace else. Oh, let's attack TCP. What are we going to do? The SYN-ACK, and then what does the system expect? It expects the ACK to complete the connection. Well, if a half-open connection, how many half-open connections does it take? Probably not very many. I don't know the exact number, but the buffer that's there was not set up to deal with that sort of an attack. It's relatively small. And what if I'm sitting there waiting to complete all these connections, and I got to have a picture here in a minute, then the legitimate users can't get on. How can you prevent that one? Firewall configuration, so that the firewall sends the SYN-ACK, and if it doesn't get it pretty quick, it sends the SYN-ACK to the ACK to the machine, and if it doesn't get it from the other device pretty quickly, it just drops the connection. So there are ways to do these things to hopefully mitigate the damage. The SYN-ACK, the SYN flood attack, the distributed denial of service. Distributed just means it's coming from multiple locations instead of a single location. One of the distributed denial of service attacks was the Smurf attack, where you send something out and everybody answers a single machine, like your web server. The SYN-ACK, the denial of service, distributed denial of service, the SYN attack. This is just a picture of it. Request, the response, but then there's no completion of the connection. Once the buffer gets full, wait. Once the buffer gets full, you don't take any more. The device doesn't take any more connections. Yes?
10 for regular machine.
10. Wireless distributed denial of service. So there are a number of ways to attack wireless. One of which would be just run a microwave, wouldn't it? Would that work? Or make a phone call on a wireless phone in the 2.4 gigahertz range. Cell phones don't do it. Or you can just have a generator, signal generator that floods the spectrum.
Not that little screen in front of the microwave, then it's doing it.
Well, it's supposed to. They leak.
Let's hazardous stuff in it.
Yes. Didn't know you were standing there cooking yourself, did you? They make leak detectors. Is it going to happen all the time? No. I had a student one time said, "Oh, my wireless isn't working real well." I said, "Where is it?" Well, it was sitting on top of his refrigerator under a fluorescent light bulb next to his microwave. The questions that you see are kind of probably security plus questions. I don't think they're network plus questions. Is one of the ones that I remember from the test bank was that the wireless quits working during the lunch hour in the break area.
Oh, no, it was a network question.
That was a network plus question, yeah.
It's like interference.
Interference, yeah, well, no. Interfering because they're on the same frequency. All your wireless goes down when you're playing with your wireless game controllers. Same frequency. I just did one on myself. I had some help, but I did one on myself. A wireless headset and a wireless connection. Well, they're on the same frequency. Lots of different devices out there. The way wireless works we use, what makes an Ethernet an Ethernet? Aha, you didn't think I'd get that one in there today, did you? CSMA CD and? Bus, okay. What kind of media access control does wireless use? Collision avoidance. What has to happen before you can get onto the wireless network? You got to have permission. That's what collision avoidance does. There are a number of things that happen, the beacons, and that they're going to get into here in a minute, and those kinds of things. But once you try to get on, you send a request to send an RTS package. The wireless access point sends back a CTS, a clear to send packet. Once that happens, you own the media. What if I now go on and download a movie? I'm hogging it up. What about when somebody else wants to get on? Sorry. So there are a number of ways to mess these up. What's the other thing that hopefully pops to mind about wireless? We spend a lot of time setting up these secure networks, firewalls, and filter routers. And where's the wireless access point? It's right in the middle of your network, probably. It'll go as far as it reaches, but where are you once you get connected to it? I'm on the network. I'm right in the middle of the network. Where do these things sit? They're inside the firewall. Who can connect to them? What kind of, and we'll do wireless next week, a major wireless lab next week. How are you going to make wireless more secure? It's got some configurations that you can do with it too. So this is the client, that's the ACK and all of those things, CSMA, CA, and the ACK. These guys, client B and C, are just sitting here waiting for their turn in order to get onto the network. The disassociation frame, what this does is sends a disassociate packet to the access point, which basically just hangs up on you. So they have those things. Spoofing, impersonation, pretend to be something else. Different attacks. Attacker may spoof her address so that her malicious actions would be attributed to a valid user. That'd be good, huh? I'm going to do something really nasty, so I'm going to put Will's IP address in so that he gets blamed for it. Those things happen. If you're going to attack somebody for real, you're going to use your own IP address? You're going to use somebody else's. Spoof act. What is one of the things a lot of people use, one of the reasons that people like these public proxy servers is they really do become anonymous. And if you attack using them, then it's much harder to track. It's not impossible, but it's much harder to track which machine it actually came from. It requires more investigation. Spoof a network address with an address of a known or trusted host. So if I spoof it with a known or a trusted host, then you trust me and you'll send me the trusted information. Set up the access point and trick all the wireless devices to communicate with the imposter device. This is the one I was talking about earlier. Let's go into Starbucks, McDonald's, Kroger, whoever else. And we're going to set ourselves up as an imposter device so that all the traffic goes to us instead of to the real device. Kroger guy said one time he was really worried because the scales were on a wireless network in Kroger. Why is that? What would be so bad about that?
You buy something really heavy.
Buy something really heavy? If the scales are on a wireless device, where do you think the scales connect to?
The register.
To the register. Where else, where do you think it goes to before it goes to the register? Which, wireless router, and then where to? I would guess, server. What does that mean to you? Open door. Exactly. Anybody read about, remember, heard about the TJ Maxx attack? The credit cards, how many credit cards? 6 million, 36 million, 30, I don't know, it's a huge number. By the way, the guy was really kind of brazen. He went to Turkey, tried to do the same thing. He's now in a Turkish prison. You don't want to be in a Turkish prison. But how did they get onto that? How did they get into the database where all the credit cards were stored? Through wireless. The network, or the chief security officer, I guess, made a conscious decision not to upgrade the access points from WEP to WPA. Well, as a result, they lost millions of credit cards. So what goes on? What can we do? What can't we do? Spoofing, set ourselves up as a trusted. Man in the middle attack is the one that I've been talking about all day, where we set ourselves up as the default gateway or as the whatever else, and all the traffic goes through us. That's what the Cane 2 lab is about for this week, along with the layer 2 stuff. Can be active or passive, whatever we're going to do with it. It also has, and the next one I think is DNS spoofing. It has a DNS spoofing capability. But again, the device that they have that we go to the internet is smarter than some of these things, and it'll fix it for you. So, oh no, you're wrong. So when you do that, use a local device as the spoof device, like 10.60.66.253. It'll ask you for a username and password, but you can see what happens, what goes on in these things. A replay attack simply means that we record the information. Comes back to our protocol analyzer. We record the information, and then after they're done, we replay what goes on. If we wanted to get on to James's bank account, we know it's big, and we recorded the information and he's done, we could replay the information and get authenticated, theoretically. Now, most of the authentication protocols are more sophisticated than to just allow a simple replay, because they have a salt in them, maybe a random number. That's what challenge is about in the CHAP protocol, so that the challenge would be different and you would generate a different hash in order to do those things. Network attacks, antiquated protocols, we've talked about these before. SNMP is a protocol we really hadn't talked about. There are 3 versions of it, 1, 2, and 3. 1 and 2 are not secure. What this can do is allow you to manage devices. What it's typically used for is monitoring devices. And it uses a password called the community string. They call it a password. It's a community string, which is, in versions 1 and 2, not secure. Available as long as we can intercept it with our protocol analyzer. It goes back to being able to get the information off of the switch. And once we do that, then we can do whatever the administrator could do with that device. DNS poisoning. This, again, is part of the cane that you can look at when we do cane enable, that you can look at how to do that. When you do cane enable, you can't just make changes to the thing and then say, okay, now it's going to work. You got to kind of stop it and do through the whole recapture process again before these things will work. And the last time we did cane enable, and we went outside the network, our friends at Virginia Beach, and it is a very smart firewall, said, oh no, you made a mistake, let me fix that for you. So, but as long as we keep the spoofing, the DNS spoofing to some internal IP address, you can see what happens. And the objective of these labs is to demonstrate the principles, not to give you some sophisticated tool. These are all basic rudimentary tools, but what they do is demonstrate the different types of attacks that can take place with more sophisticated tools. Another way you could do this, a much simpler way to do this, as long as we get physical access to the computer, is just go change the host file. Because what order does DNS resolve in? First looks at the cache, and then it looks at the host file. Then if you can't find it, it goes to the DNS server. I had one in a security class, was one woman and a whole bunch of guys, and they were giving her a hard time. And the one who was giving her the hardest time left his computer open one time. So she got onto his host file and made about everything that he went to, you know, ESPN and all those things, went to Barbie.com. So can you use these things? Yeah. What will break this? What will break this, do you think? You know what will break the host file? Proxy server. You don't ever do the lookup. The proxy does all the lookups for you. Lots of different things that you can do. Lots of different things we're throwing out. We'll do all of these things as we go through the 3 courses. But lots of different things that you can do to make a network more secure. Can you make it absolutely secure? Certainly not. But can you make it more secure? Hopefully. And this is the DNS. Go to myspace.com. Substitute the IP address to a fraudulent IP address. This is a hazard of DNS lookup. Maybe we put in a really good looking bank page at the fraudulent address. And now you put in your username and password. Fraudulent address is different than the phishing attacks, which just want you to click on them.
In that case, MySpace, you could have
They just use MySpace as an example. This could be
a
anything.
page that looks like MySpace.
You back exactly. I could have a page that looks like Wachovia.com. Or Citi.com, or BankOfAmerica.com. And Bank of America, all these locations have taken precautions to make it more complex than just going there from the security standpoint. When you go to Bank of America, we have an account there. You got this picture that shows up, and if it doesn't, there's something wrong, because that's what you put on your page there. There are ways around any of these things. DNS poisoning, we just simply substitute the address and again look at the DNS poisoning and the cane enable capability. Host file, I think everybody saw one of those in the Windows courses. I know everybody hadn't had the Windows courses yet, but you saw one of those. This is where we just go in and we could go in and put whatever we wanted in here. We could find the IP address for ESPN and put, you know, Barbie.com, which is what she did for Brian. It's a long time ago. DNS poisoning. This is the one that they go through. Evil.net. What Evil.net does is it gets a redirect to the valid DNS server. The valid DNS server then gets the bad addresses in it. Well, once the valid DNS server gets the bad addresses, then he's going to send it to all of its DNS friends. So we can attack the DNS. DNS transfers, you've done those. Everybody hopefully got to that now. You've got to be a real address. You transfer the contents of one zone to your computer. The issue with DNS transfers is if we allow them, what if we allow the transfer of all of the addresses on our private network? We've uncomplicated the problem a little bit. One piece of the puzzle that somebody needs to use. By default, in Windows servers, zone transfers are not allowed. You've got to go in and turn them on. You can specify to any machine, to specific machines, so that you minimize the issue there. ARP we've talked about. ARP, really smart protocol, takes an answer to the question you never asked, which means that, and that's what Cain Enable does. When you do the man in the middle, what Cain does is sends an ARP packet to all of the captured machines, and please don't everybody capture everybody or it gets really weird. To the captured machine, say, I'm the default gateway. So your machine sends all of your outside traffic to the Cain machine, which then just records everything, cracks passwords for you, captures all of the traffic. And we get the hashes. Now we can take the hashes for all the passwords that you've used and dump them into a password cracker and let it run separately. So these things, all part of the, back to the not real sophisticated protocols that we use. TCP has some weaknesses. This is one of them. Steal data, MAC flooding, prevent internet access, protocol-based attacks, and that table's in the book. TCP hijacking, advantage of the weaknesses. In TCP, the header fields, and what this thing does is sends an out of order packet, because remember we keep track of those things by number, and if you get one that's in a particular order, it just simply drops all the other ones and says, oh yeah, you're the valid connection, not this other guy. So we can take control of that. And that goes back to the protocol analyzer. You've got to be able to get the SIN numbers, the acknowledgement information, so that you can attack with these things. Wireless attacks, rogue attacks. Somebody comes in and plugs in a wireless access point. They've got the story in the book that Joanne, I don't know who they had, wants a wireless access point in the break area. And IT said no. So Joanne went out and bought one, because you can buy it for about $19, $20, $30, and plugged it into her network connection, because her office was right next to the break area. Well, now we have a wireless access point, but what's the issue? So's the guy in the parking lot. So is everybody that's in range. And how far does that range go? As far as it can. How far is that generally?
Yeah, inside about 300.
Inside about, well, what, anybody, go to the internet sometime and search for the Pringles can wireless antenna.
10 miles.
Oh yeah, it depends on the antenna.
They can go 10 miles. They've actually
Yeah.
10 miles.
It can go a long way. Look at some of those antennas.
They might have a walk strainer too.
Yeah, there's lots of things, yeah. I've seen a lot of those out there, different. Directional antenna. We use omnidirectional antennas for these things. A directional antenna is going to give you a lot more focus signal, a lot more range. So
So if the antenna is vertical, then it's transmitting
yeah,
the signal is stronger vertically,
yeah. Well,
right?
they're usually horizontal.
I thought like if you had a cord.
Well, those are, depends on how the antenna's wound. No, I see what you're, I'm talking about the access point.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, it depends on how the antenna's wound. The ones in the computers themselves are not really that sensitive. They don't have a greater range. You can put external antennas on that have substantial range. So yeah, I put in this wireless access point. And I walked around with my wireless computer, and I said, oh, it only goes to this wall. Yeah, maybe. On that computer, it only goes to that wall. But what if you put an external antenna on it? How far do they really go? You can make these things better. There is a window film, and I don't know if it's out or not. The military was using it, and supposedly it was going to be released for civilian use, that you can put on the windows that will stop these things. A Faraday cage is a device that keeps the signal in and keeps other signals out, but keeps the signal in the building. But that really needs to be done probably when you build the building itself, not something that you want to put in later on. Ward driving and scanning. Ward driving, and they talk about walking around, is also called ward driving. I call it ward walking. Sometimes if you want to see what's available, go get one of these devices, and there are a lot of them out there that are free. Put it on your computer and see what you get on your wireless. Had a guy one time did it, drove down Williamson Road. He picked up, I don't know, maybe 15 or 20 open wireless access points. Got stopped at a red light, actually got connected to one. There also is one called war flying, where they fly an airplane looking for these things. But war driving, generally people driving around these things. Scanning each wireless device looks for the beacon frames. The beacon frames say, here I am, this is who I am, this is my SSID, those kinds of things, and that's what you connect to get associated with the access point. Wireless location mapping, war driving, so technically involves an automobile, but you can use it in walking also. Tools, a mobile computing device, wireless NIC, antennas, global GPS on the computer is kind of helpful for mapping these things also. And then some sort of software to actually find the systems. Bluetooth snarfing technology, Bluetooth short range, 30 meters. There are ways to do that. There's a video that I'll move up to this week that I think is kind of interesting, where the guy's standing there with his computer and his Bluetooth device, and he's listening to somebody with his Bluetooth headset. Well, he's ordering donuts, I think, isn't he, or something like that? Coffee shop, yeah, ordering coffee. Nothing really bad there, but it just shows you what the vulnerabilities are in these things. Now, what's one of the vulnerabilities of these things is the default. What's the default? 4 zeros, isn't it? To connect, 0, 0, 0, 0. And that's what most of them come up with. And he used that capability. Blue snarfing, unaccessed information, blue jacking, and I think these are terms that you might see, if you take the test, you might see on the test. Bluetooth, because wireless, they actually have added a lot of wireless to Security Plus, which probably aren't in that test bank that we have. Null sessions, or just that, sessions that, unauthenticated sessions, have been fixed in Server 2003. This has been a Microsoft vulnerability. It's still available in NT4 and in Windows 2000, and they've got a command in there, a net use command to try to use that. It takes advantage of one of the hidden shares that doesn't require authentication. 2003 on up, that's been fixed, and a patch doesn't fix that for you. Domain name kiting, this is one I found kind of interesting, and you can read about it, is the 5-day grace period. These guys put up the domain for a certain period of time, and they get people to click on the ads, and they get the ad revenue without actually having to pay for the domain name. Like check kiting. Check kiting is, say, one of the ways you do check kiting, we'll ask our bankers back here, is you put a wrong routing number on a check, and it sends it the wrong check, then you've got that money for the amount of time that it takes them to determine that it's at the wrong bank and sends it to the correct bank. Domain name kiting, similar concept. Thought I was never going to get here, didn't you? So what's the killer app for security? I don't think so. I guess we could blow it up.
You are the killer app.
I'm not the killer app.
Right?
No. Yeah. You are. As well as all of your users. You've got to educate your users what to use and not use. Back to those of you who do work in these areas and maybe, and people who worked at Best Buy really came up with some interesting stories. What do people get? The number of things that you get, it's just incredible. Why do they get that? Ask Chris sometime about some of the machines that non-technical students have brought to him. How long it takes to clear them out. How did they get 1,000 viruses on a computer and not know it? But it happens. Some vulnerabilities, we talked about some vulnerabilities, physical, we've alluded to physical vulnerabilities, false ceilings, overheads, exposed wiring, those kinds of things. Configuration we've talked about before. And then the protocol vulnerabilities. All of those are real. Are they all easily exploited? If it was this easy, then we'd all be in the Caribbean, you know, rich. It takes a lot of work. It's something that is pretty boring. Sit down and do the surveillance. Oh, they're a lot more patient than I am. It takes, you go on and on and on and on and on as to how you do these things. But surveillance is the first step to take in it. Questions?
Comment.
Comment.